Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to talk about growing Cordyceps militaris, and I'm outside here because I think you'll be able to see what I'm about to show you a little better in the natural light here. Cordyceps militaris isn't a difficult mushroom to grow, I wouldn't say, but there are some subtleties that you have to hit right or else you're not going to have much success. So this process I'm going to show you today is like everything else I do. I try to make it like the simplest but effective. So try and simplify everything down to basic steps, and don't get too crazy with it, but still get a ton of mushrooms. And low tech, as always, no big fancy equipment here. But the first thing that's really important in growing Cordyceps militaris is getting a good culture. And that is by far the most important thing you need to do. If you buy a junk culture, it doesn't matter how well you do on the rest of your steps, you're not going to get any mushrooms. These Cordyceps militaris cultures senesce very quickly. That means they only are very productive for a short time. And there's a lot of junk cultures out there on the internet. And so I'm going to tell you the two places I buy cultures from. And the first one is Jeff Manganaro from Appalachian Gold on Etsy, and that's where these syringes came from. So what I do is I order liquid culture syringes like these, and basically you get your living Cordyceps militaris mycelium suspended in nutrient broth in these syringes. So this is what you'll get in the mail, and that's your starting point. So Jeff Manganaro from Appalachian Gold on Etsy has great Cordyceps militaris cultures, and the other one is terrestrial fungi, which is Ryan Paul Gates. The name of his company is Terrestrial Fungi, and he also has some awesome cultures. So start with good cultures and you'll be able to do this no problem. Now Cordyceps is edible, militaris is edible. I haven't eaten it myself, but people say it tastes really good. They cook it into soups and do a lot of different stuff with it. But it is obviously medicinal. It's one of the most highly regarded medicinal mushrooms, and you can make awesome homemade teas and tinctures with it. It makes the most beautiful orange tincture you've ever seen. It's really cool stuff. So basically I take the syringe, which you get in the mail, and I expand it out into jars of liquid culture that look like this. And this is a high 5 strain from Jeff Manganaro, and you can see if I shake that up, super chunky mycelium in there. There's actually like a mat sitting right on top there, and this is really good stuff. And if you want to know how to take the syringe and turn it into this, I have a video on that. Just look at my liquid culture video, and it's going to show you exactly how I did that. But this is going to be our starter culture that we're actually going to grow from here. So you can take one syringe like this and expand it out into 10-12 jars that look like this, and get your grow going. These syringes are going to cost you about $30 or so, and that's really not much because you can expand these way out and actually grow a lot of Cordyceps mushrooms with them. And to make these, because Cordyceps is so sensitive to aging out, to make good quality cultures is pretty difficult. That's why just anybody can do it. So we're gonna head down into the mushroom lab and we'll get rolling on this process. Down in the lab, we're set up in front of the flow hood here, which is not running yet. Everything's been just cleaned, wiped down with alcohol. Real basic equipment you need for this, not a big deal. This is just a instant rice cooker. I got this from Walmart. It was about 30 bucks. It's a perfect size for doing Cordyceps militaris grows. And once we have our substrate prepared, we're going to pack them into these storage totes. These are just small, like shoebox size storage totes. I got these from Walmart too, I believe. They're probably a few, $3-4, whatever. But this is going to be our actual grow container. In the lids, I've drilled some holes, and these just snap on. The lids do. But I've drilled some 1/4-inch holes, and I'm just covering those with like micropore medical tape to give a little air exchange into the bins as you're growing. I found this one doesn't have any tape on it. I found that about 4 1/4 inch holes for a box this size is about perfect for air exchange. So some of them I drilled a few more when I was experimenting. That one has 6 in it, but 4 seems to be the ticket. But you can always block some off if you have too many holes. You just take a piece of packing tape or scotch tape and tape over the ones you don't need, because that'll block off the air and you're good to go. So no big deal. So our rice cooker here, this is pretty much set to automatically cook rice. So it's kind of like a set it and forget it kind of thing. I have 1 liter of brown rice measured up here. This is just long grain brown rice, and that's going to go into our cooker. And then we're going to add some 1 quart of distilled water. But in our distilled water, we're going to have a bunch of nutrients mixed in that's going to increase our mushroom yield. So these are our supplements that are going to go in. I have them all weighed up on my little gram scale here. I'll go through what they are, and I'll talk about it in case you can't read my awful writing here. But for each quart of water, each batch, I have 30 grams dextrose, 3 grams soy peptone, 2 grams monopotassium phosphate, 1 gram magnesium sulfate, and 1 gram ammonium citrate. So you're mostly dealing with powders here. All these supplements are easily available online. A lot of the mushroom supply companies have these, or they actually have it all pre-mixed as well, because so many people are into growing militaris now. But here's my supplements. Here's our dextrose right here. It's just powdered. Magnesium sulfate is just Epsom salt. That's an easy one to get. Here's our soy peptone. We talked about that one in our liquid culture video. And ammonium citrate, just basically citric acid. That's a crystallized product. And what do we have here? Here's our monopotassium phosphate. That's just a common plant nutrient, easy to get. It's like a powder sugar as well. And that should be it. Everything else is, everything's pretty much just powdered or crystal. Real easy to deal with, real easy to measure up. So we got our liter of brown rice. It's going in with 1 quart of distilled water with all of our nutrient supplements dissolved into the water. Then we're going to set the rice cooker. I'm just going to hit it on brown rice and start. The one thing you want to turn off, though, is this keep warm function. You want to make sure that automatically turns on when you start the cooker. You want to make sure you hit that button and turn that off, because once the cooking's done, we want the heat to just shut right off. Otherwise, you'll get mushy grains. And this process and this recipe are basically just a very slight modification on the recipe from Ryan Paul Gates from Terrestrial Fungi. There's a lot of incarnations of this, but this is the recipe that's worked for me, and I pretty much got it directly from him. And again, he has great cultures. It's a good company to deal with if you need cultures or have any questions. So I'm going to pour our rice in here. And then I'm going to use the same container to measure up 1 quart of water and mix our supplements in. Here's our nutrient solution, mostly dissolved. My peptone's getting kind of chunky, but it's all right. Dump that in there, and then I just kind of take a spoon and just kind of level everything out. That's it. When we come back, everything else is going to be with the laminar flow hood running here, all the rest of the steps, but this one, it's not really necessary. So we're just going to close the lid tight, and this will blow some steam, so make sure you have it away from anything you don't want steamed. So we're going to hit brown rice, turn the keep warm function off, and it's going to kick off on itself. There it goes. So this is going to take about 45 minutes to fully cook, and we'll be back with the flow hood running. In the meantime, while our rice cooker is going, I'm going to prep our containers. Now that recipe I gave you is going to fill 2 of these containers. Not fill it, but it's going to give us what we need for our grow. Basically, Cordyceps doesn't like really thick substrate, so you want to go maybe like an inch of substrate in here. So you're going to have 1 inch to 1.5 inches of level substrate all the way across the bottoms of these. And then these are going to incubate in a larger storage tote, which I have here. This has some holes in it that I have stuffed with polyfill. And right now, all these containers are sprayed down with rubbing alcohol on the inside. And I'm going to leave them sealed and just let them steep in that rubbing alcohol to kind of disinfect. Same with these. I'll end up wiping them down and drying them out before I pack the substrate in them, obviously. But I have each hole is covered with 2 layers of micropore tape. And yeah, so these 2 storage totes will fit inside this 1 storage tote. So basically, if you go to Walmart and they're out of storage totes, it's my fault. I'm sorry, but I use a lot of them in my mushroom growing adventures. So, but these incubate really fast. They're only going to have to sit in that larger storage tote for 3 to 4 days, I would say, in darkness to colonize, and then we'll be moving them onto the lights. Okay, our rice just finished up here, and I got the flow hood running. I got the headset on, so hopefully you guys can hear me. Everything I'm going to be doing from now on is going to be with sanitized gloves on. First thing we have to do is cool this rice down. It's way too hot. If you inoculated it at this point, it would just kill your liquid culture. So we're going to pull this out of here and sit it on a canning jar ring. Just like that, right in front of the flow hood. And we're going to have to let this cool down to room temperature. I'm just going to stir it up with a sanitized spoon, and we'll let it cool down to room temperature, and at that point we can inoculate it. Alright, we gave it a good stir. That's really important because you want to get the grains off the bottom. You don't want to leave them to bake down, because that's a hot spot in the pot when you pull it out. So we don't want grains getting mushy. That leads to contamination. So make sure as soon as you pull it out of the cooker, you give it a good stir with a sterilized spoon. And just spray the spoon down with rubbing alcohol. So we got everything nice and fluffed up, and we'll leave that sit right in front of the flow hood for probably about a half hour to cool down. Our substrate's cooled down, and I'm going to go ahead and add my liquid culture now. Gave her a shake. I got that real thick orange mat on top and a bunch of chunky mycelium in the broth. So this has all been sprayed down with rubbing alcohol, and I'm going to pour it in to our rice and then mix it well. And basically you have to let the rice dry out to what's called field capacity. So basically I'm going to be stirring it. I'm going to leave it sit in front of the flow hood after I stir the mycelium in. And I'm going to come down and I'm going to stir it every, I'd say, half hour to an hour. If you pack it into the tubs when it's too wet, you're just going to end up with contamination. So keep stirring that rice. I'm going to do it about 3 times, and keep stirring it in front of the flow hood until there's no standing liquid at all in the bottom of the pot as you stir, and to the point where you want your rice grains about looking like this again. So just keep stirring and letting the air, sterilized air, blow on it till it gets back to this almost like dry looking texture, and that's where you want it to pack in the tubs. Okay, our substrate is just about ready. I've been stirring it. I've stirred it about 3 times over the last 3 to 4 hours, and it's starting to look nice and dry again. And it's just about ready, I think, to pack in our containers. So I went ahead and I misted our containers again with some rubbing alcohol, and I'm just letting them sit in front of the flow hood here to dry out in the sterile air. So I'm gonna let this rice sit another few minutes while these containers dry off, that alcohol wicks off, and then I'm gonna go ahead and pack the substrate into these 2 containers, seal them up, and then move them to our master container over there. So I'll set the camera up here and you guys can watch me work as I fill these things. Basically, I'm just trying to evenly distribute it between the 2 containers and get it nice and even across the bottom. We're going to end up with about 1 to 1.5 inches of substrate, I would say, in each container. Here's our tubs contained in the big master tub, and I'll keep them in there. That'll help with the contamination, keep the airflow down, because obviously these little sterilite totes aren't totally sealed. So it should only take, a lot of times with these aggressive cordyceps strains, it's only like 3 to 5 days before they're nice and white and fuzzed up. And at that point, we'll move them under the lights over here on the light tables. But right now, I'm just going to leave them covered with a towel and let them chill for a few days here in the dark. We are at 4 days after inoculation here, and we're at full colonization. These tubs are looking really good, and there's no alterations needed here. These are going to fruit right inside the tubs, right inside of our big tub. And I did move them under the lights, and we have some 6500K fluorescence running 12 on, 12 off here. And this is where they're going to sit, and they're going to do their thing. So this is the cool thing about this liquid culture flood method, is that you get really fast colonization and can outrace any contams, because we're not doing a true sterilization. It's basically like a super pasteurization with the rice cooker method. But we did it right on this one. We have clean colonization. Usually if you see contams, it'll be right at the tub interface where maybe a mold spore survived the alcohol disinfection. But these are all looking great. Probably in about 3-4 days, we'll see some orange pigment starting to develop more in the mycelium, and then we'll start to get some pinning. So we'll let them ride here with the lights running on them, and we'll jump back in when they start to pin. We're at a few days later here, about a week or so after inoculation, and I'm not sure the camera's going to pick it up, but the mycelium is developing a little more orange pigmentation, which is normal. I'm thinking we're going to start seeing pinning in about a week. You can see there's a good amount of condensation on the walls and on the lid of the tub. That's normal. It'll just kind of bead up there and hang out. What you don't want to see is like standing water down here along the bottom of your tub, bottom corners. If you do see that, it probably means your substrate was too wet. You should have left it dry out in front of the flow hood a little more. It doesn't mean it's a necessary fail on your grow. I have had them still fruit normally with some standing water in the tub, so don't give up on them, but it does kind of increase your chances of contamination. And I did use 600 milliliters of liquid culture, and I've used as little as 300, as much as 600. It seems like with using 600 mils, you definitely do get faster colonization, which means a less chance of contamination. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you some pictures from my last round of grows. I've grown a few different strains, and typically we're around 5-6 weeks, I would say, from inoculation to picking. And some of the strains will develop a lot of conidiophores, which look like little grains of sand on the tips of your cordyceps mushrooms, and some don't develop as many. It's really not crucial. It's just kind of strain dependent. You can see pretty much the entire block will be completely covered with nice orange cordyceps mushrooms. And what I do with them is, once I pick them, I get them in the dehydrator and dry them at real low temperature. Usually dry them around 95, 100 degrees. And at that point, you can just bag them up, keep them in the fridge or freezer until you're ready to use them. If you're going to make them into like a tea or tincture, it really makes a really brightly colored orange, beautiful tea or tincture with lots of good medicinal benefits. So if you guys have any questions or tips based on your personal experience growing these Cordyceps militaris, I'd love to talk with you in comments. So just hit me up.